Story 1. When I regained some semblance of consciousness, the room was filled with bright lights, and I could feel people manipulating my body. But I experienced no pain, just a heightened mental awareness. Was I dead? Is this what death feels like? I could sense wires and tubes all around. I'd been placed in a medically induced coma for 3 days. When I finally opened my eyes, my family had gathered around my bedside. My wife, Helen, was on my right, and my 5 children encircled the bed. At this moment, my memory was hazy, and I couldn't recall why I was in the hospital or what had transpired. My loving wife gazed at me and said, "Darling, you really frightened us this time, but you're going to be all right now." I looked at Helen and inquired, "What happened?" She explained, "One of the stents that was inserted during your triple bypass surgery failed. It was the graft that required a stent a month later. Unfortunately, it was too weak and collapsed around the stent, obstructing blood flow." Suddenly, some fragments of my memory returned. The previous year, following my annual checkup, my doctor had detected blockages near my heart and immediately recommended triple bypass surgery, a complex open-heart procedure. This open-heart procedure, blood vessels from other parts of my body were used to replace the damaged or blocked ones. About a month after the surgery, additional tests had revealed that one graft hadn't healed as well as the other 2, so a stent was inserted to reinforce it. Until now, we had believed everything was fine. Due to the complications, I had been unable to work for almost 6 months. I meticulously followed my doctor's instructions, shedding weight, joining a gym for regular exercise, and carefully monitoring my diet. My wife Helen had been my unwavering support by my side throughout the journey. When I exercised, she exercised with me and adopted my dietary choices. Over the next 6 months I shed 40 pounds, while Helen, who was now a fit 49-year-old, lost 20 pounds and looked as stunning as she did on our wedding day, with no wrinkles or excess fat in sight. I met Helen during our college years. She was an 18-year-old freshman, while I, a 20-year-old junior. Within a few weeks we became exclusive. The following year we found an apartment together. I was on track to graduate that year, and Helen was entering her 3rd year of college. I managed to persuade my parents that pursuing an MBA was essential for securing a good job, and they readily agreed. This decision kept Helen and me together until she completed her degree, and by then I had also earned my master's. So, on a warm June day following our graduation, Helen and I tied the knot. Our marriage was idyllic. We shared everything not just because of common interests, but because we genuinely wanted to be together. It's what people call love, I suppose. In the first 7 years, we were blessed with 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. After the last one, I decided to undergo a vasectomy. We were always deeply rooted in family values, and our children were as devoted to us as we were to them. We led a busy family life, diligently working to stay debt-free. One of us was always shuttling the kids to various activities like karate, judo, ballet, dance, piano, baseball, soccer, or whatever they fancied. Not all of them were athletes, but they enjoyed participating and learned valuable life lessons along the way. Before we knew it, they were off to college, one by one, and then they started getting married. Helen and I took on all the college loans and wedding expenses because we wanted to provide our children with the best possible start in life without the burden of debt. While we had saved up for these milestones, I couldn't help but feel financially stretched, knowing I'd be in debt for another decade. Nonetheless, Helen and I were still youthful, with plenty of working years ahead to save for our retirement. We didn't regret a single dollar spent on our kids' education and weddings. It was an investment well worth it. Although I realized we missed out on extravagant vacations to places like the Caribbean and Europe, I never regretted the money we spent to ensure our children had a strong foundation in life. After my father retired, I took over his thriving insurance business in Plano, Texas, which included 3 brokers and 2 office staff. They all stayed busy. Helen waited until our youngest child started school before joining a pharmaceutical company in Dallas. She worked as a sales representative, visiting doctors' offices in the area to promote new medications and provide them with samples for their patients. Helen was a true extrovert, making her a perfect fit for the job. Her physical appearance didn't hurt either. Standing tall at 5 feet 9 inches, her weight, before she started working out with me, around 140 pounds. I thought she looked great, but with some diet and exercise, she managed to return to her college weight of 120 pounds. Our love life has always been vibrant and completely satisfying. We've explored various things together and are always open to each other's new ideas. Neither of us has ever felt the urge to be unfaithful, and we've never even discussed the possibility. I'm not a jealous person and have occasionally allowed others to dance with Helen when the opportunity arose. However, Helen never allowed any of these men to become too familiar. We're not big on dancing, but we do it at company Christmas parties and other business-related events. My name is Edward, but most people call me Ed. Unlike Helen, I've gone through some changes over the years. My hair has been rapidly graying and I gained weight, letting myself get out of shape. Through exercise and diet, I've transformed my body. Does that make me a bad husband? Not at all. I consider myself a romantic and a devoted soulmate to Helen. We still have romantic outings every Friday or Saturday. She receives fresh flowers at her office every week, and although our love life has slowed down due to my heart issues, I make every effort to ensure Helen remains satisfied. Both Helen and I work diligently to make our marriage thrive, and I believe we do an excellent job. In simple terms, we share a wonderful life together, built on our love for each other. After my family had left, I realized I was in the ICU and would be spending several days there. The doctors expressed great concern about potential brain damage and insisted on constant monitoring. I didn't quite grasp the connection between brain damage and my heart condition, but I was too weak to inquire or debate. My family returned that evening and spent a couple of hours by my side. When Helen looked at me, I could see the sadness in her eyes. I reassured her that I would be all right and there was no need to feel sorrow, but she remained silent. The following morning a police officer came to visit. I asked if I had committed a crime, to which he chuckled and replied, "No. You didn't break any laws. I was the first responder after you triggered the alarm. You played a significant role in saving my life. I'll always be grateful." "No, it's just part of my duty. I happened to be nearby and got there as quickly as possible. My memory is hazy. Can you please tell me what happened?" "Well, I can share what I know, and you can fill in the gaps. Around 2 a.m. last Friday night, I received an alert from your house alarm. I arrived at the scene within minutes, waiting for backup, because we suspected a potential break-in triggered the alarm. The alarm company attempted to contact you, starting with your home phone, then your cell, and finally your wife's cell. Only your wife answered, but she was in Denver and unaware of the situation. She mentioned you should be at home and referred us back to you. I began inspecting the house, searching for signs of a break-in, but found no evidence of one. Using my flashlight, I peered through the windows. Finally, at the rear of the house, I spotted you unconscious on the kitchen floor. I had to break in to reach you, and upon a quick examination I suspected you had suffered a heart attack. I immediately dialed emergency services and began performing CPR on you. The fire department arrived first, and as they are all trained medical technicians, I allowed them to take over your treatment. Eventually, an ambulance arrived, and you were swiftly transported to the hospital for medical care. I informed my office that I had to break into your home because your wife was in Denver, and you were hospitalized. They instructed me to stay at the house until the door could be properly secured. A carpenter was summoned to secure the door with plywood, and I also contacted the alarm company to deactivate the alarm. Before leaving your house, I made an attempt to tidy up the kitchen, as it was left somewhat messy by the medical technicians and ambulance crew. In the midst of the chaos, I discovered your cell phone, which I am returning to you now. That's all the information I have regarding the incident. With the details provided by the officer, I was able to piece together some of the missing parts of the story. I recall waking up with severe chest pains, attempting to reach the refrigerator for water and an aspirin, but collapsing against it. The alarm panel happened to be nearby, and I somehow managed to summon help by pressing the panic button. I knelt down, realizing the gravity of the situation, and tried to contact my wife, Helen, via FaceTime using the command, "Hey Siri, FaceTime Helen." Within moments, an undressed Helen appeared on the screen, asking what was wrong. However, by that point the alarm was blaring, making communication impossible. It was unusual for her to be undressed while sleeping, but what alarmed me even more was the presence of an unfamiliar hand on her shoulder. That's when I lost consciousness, and I likely would have succumbed if not for the determined actions of the deputy. Later that afternoon, I finally had an opportunity to meet with the heart doctor. During his previous visits, I had either been in a coma, under the influence of medication, or asleep. He told me, "Ed, you may be the luckiest man I have ever treated." I was taken aback and asked, "Why is that? In the realm of medicine, your survival shouldn't have been possible. I can't determine the duration you were on the floor before the deputy discovered you, but by the time he reached you, it seemed you had ceased breathing. I'm uncertain about the extent of time your brain was deprived of oxygen, but it was likely sufficient to potentially cause damage, necessitating the 3-day coma. The deputy initiated CPR to sustain you until the fire department arrived and took over. During the ambulance journey to the hospital, the crew faced 2 instances where it appeared you might not make it. On one occasion, they had to halt the ambulance, and both team members had to perform CPR before resuming. Even after your arrival at the hospital, your condition remained precarious. The graft inserted last year eventually deteriorated. We harbored concerns from the beginning, which is why we later introduced a stent. Unfortunately, the stent proved ineffective. You need to understand that you did nothing wrong. You've diligently followed my recommendations, losing weight, exercising, and adhering to your diet. At the moment, I'm uncertain if there's any brain damage, but I believe you're currently free from such issues." Around that time, Helen arrived, offering a warm welcome and a kiss. Considering the memories of that fateful night, my heart ached. My loving wife of 30 years had betrayed me. I recognized that I was in no condition to either confront her or discuss the matter, so I feigned difficulty in speaking. However, I knew that at some point we would need to have a conversation. How could I prevent myself from revealing that I was aware of her infidelity? Was it truly an affair? I had no answers. I remained hospitalized for 3 weeks before being discharged with strict instructions to take it easy at home, avoid lifting anything over 5 pounds, and abstain from intimate activity. Avoiding physical intimacy wasn't challenging because I wasn't certain if I could ever engage in such a relationship with Helen again. They say time can heal wounds, but in my case it appeared that my heart was recovering physically while my emotional pain lingered. Part of my heart felt as though a hole had been bored through it, and I questioned if it could ever be repaired. Helen took time off from work and provided me with care around the clock. We had been together for long enough that she sensed my unhappiness and recognized that something deeply troubled me. Finally, after approximately 3 weeks at home, we sat down to have a conversation. "Ed, I've sensed since your illness that something significant is weighing on you. Could you please tell me what's wrong?" "Yes, in fact, your actions may have exacerbated my situation. I'm aware, and I want you to be honest with me, starting with why. What are you talking about?" "I am aware that you have had, and possibly continue to have, an affair." "That's absurd. How can you accuse me of that? Do you want me to provide evidence? Are you that obtuse? Why can't you be honest and just confess?" "There is no evidence, and I have not been unfaithful. I can't comprehend how you can sit there and accuse me of something like this. You must be mad. Do you recall my FaceTime call on the night I fell ill? Do you remember a hand appearing on your shoulder and someone saying, 'Honey, is it about that alarm again?' I witnessed it all, and it will remain etched in my memory forever." In truth, I hadn't heard a word, but Helen was unaware of that fact. "Do you need further proof? You violated our marriage vows and concocted a false trip to be with your lover." "Yes, I know it was fabricated because I contacted your HR. And they confirmed you took 2 personal days. I can't begin to convey the pain and suffering you've caused me. I nearly died, and all of this has hindered my recovery. Do you now understand why I've been distant for the past 4 weeks? Once again, I want the entire story, starting with why. If you choose not to answer, Then I expect you to pack a bag and leave. Ed, this is painful. Are you sure you want me to tell you? I told you if you choose not to answer, then pack your bags and go. I won't sit here and listen to your lies. All right, I will tell you, but I'd prefer not to. Please don't threaten me until I've disclosed everything, and if you want me to leave, then I will. I sat there, gazing at her, waiting for her to continue. I need to go back 4 months to my company's Christmas party. Do you remember when you cautioned me about the guy who was being overly familiar with me while we were dancing? I replied. Yes, I was furious and wanted to confront him. Please don't tell me you had an affair with him. Well, rest assured, we didn't have an affair. David is my immediate boss, and ever since he began working in Dallas last autumn, he has been making advances toward me. I've consistently managed to deter his advances without any issues. I wasn't and still am not interested in extramarital relations. But I'm confused. Did you or didn't you recently travel to Denver with him, spending 2 days and nights in the same hotel room? Please tell me it was just a friendly trip and nothing happened. Helen sighed, saying, Ed, yes, we had a physical encounter. I regret every moment of that weekend. Oh, I bet he's younger and in great shape, I commented. Yes, he's 15 years younger than us. 3 months ago, during my annual evaluation, David inquired about my future plans. He knew I had been performing the same job for nearly 15 years and asked if I intended to continue until retirement. You know, I've been unhappy with all the driving around Dallas and the worsening traffic. He questioned why I hadn't applied for a promotion. I explained that I had indeed applied for his position, but they selected him from the Atlanta office. Then he revealed that he was on a shortlist for a promotion, making his position available again. I expressed my keen interest in advancing. He asked how far I was willing to go, and I inquired about his expectations. He suggested an intimate relationship, promising me his job in return. My mouth hung open in disbelief as I learned that Helen had fallen victim to blackmail and had reluctantly agreed to the man's demands. I admonished him, warning that such actions amounted to blackmail and could lead to severe consequences. He retorted that it was a matter strictly between him and me, involving no one else. I stressed that I was happily married and had no intention of jeopardizing my marriage in any way. He reassured me, insisting that all he desired was 1 weekend after which he would ensure my promotion. Helen, how could you have fallen for that? I've been urging you for years to quit that job. Our financial situation doesn't require your income, and with my recent illness and the current health issues, you've taken unpaid leave. It may take us a bit longer to pay off our debts, but we'll manage. Helen defended her decision, explaining that, despite not needing the money, she enjoyed keeping busy. Additionally, with the children's college expenses and weddings, the extra income helped pay off their loans. She claimed to generally enjoy her work, albeit not the long commutes or dealing with her boss. So before you continue, did you eventually get the promotion? No, it turns out he didn't fulfill his promise, so he's still at the company. My frustration grew. So you went through with it, and you didn't even get the promotion. Helen was visibly upset, tears streaming down her face. I would never have agreed if I thought he wouldn't keep his word. Now, let me finish my story. She recounted how her boss persisted daily at work, pressuring her despite her concerns about her marriage. About 6 weeks ago, she reluctantly agreed. They concocted a story about attending a management meeting in Denver, selecting a weekend for their rendezvous. Helen explained that she hoped for a promotion and expressed her reluctance to go. I noted that it was unusual since she had never been on an overnight business trip during her time at the company. Helen continued, You dropped me off at the airport, and from there I met David in the departure lounge. We had a pleasant flight with business class seats, but he couldn't keep his hands off me. He booked a room with a king-sized bed, and things escalated as soon as we closed the door on Thursday afternoon. Then what happened? We spent the day sightseeing and had dinner. After a brief nap, things became intimate. However, the alarm company called, and I was on my way downstairs when you phoned. The alarm was so deafening that I couldn't hear you and hoped you hadn't seen David's hand. Now I realize you did. Your face was as pale as a ghost, and with the alarm blaring, I sensed something was amiss. I rushed to the airport and took the first flight home. Helen acknowledged her affair with David, explaining how he made her feel youthful and desirable, a stark contrast to feeling old. She expressed deep regret for betraying our marriage vows and the special bond we shared, admitting to lying and deceiving me, something unprecedented in our marriage history. Despite her remorse, my observations of her frequent work trips since my return from the hospital led me to suspect ongoing communication with David. Helen confirmed David's insistence on meetings but denied any recent intimacy, promising to reject his advances despite his reminiscences of their time in Denver and his attempts to meet again in Dallas. My trust in Helen was shaken, especially recalling her recent changes in appearance and behavior since last January, which led me to believe the affair began shortly after the Christmas party. Her silence in response to my accusations confirmed my suspicions of an ongoing affair. I proposed a halt to her work trips until we could reassess our situation and inquired about her ability to access work remotely, questioning whether she preferred to leave or stay with David. Helen's assurance of her commitment to our marriage and her willingness to quit her job if needed were overshadowed by my concerns over her being manipulated by David and the potential health risks from their affair. Despite her shock at the possibility of an STD and her assurance of no intimacy since my heart attack, I questioned her fidelity, leading to a deeper inquiry into her feelings of regret, whether they stemmed from being caught or the act of infidelity itself. Helen's admission of preferring the affair to remain secret in order to preserve the illusion of a perfect marriage was troubling. I suggested she stay with one of our children to reflect on her actions, emphasizing the consequences of her choices. As she packed and left, I retreated to my computer room, left to ponder the future of our marriage, deeply affected by the revelations and the need for time and space to process the betrayal and its impact on our relationship. In my line of work, we have access to various resources, including a close friend who happens to be a private investigator. I called and explained the situation, asking him to gather as much information as possible about Helen's boss, David Jenkins. Additionally, I requested that he keep an eye on Helen for a few days. I assumed she would stay with one of our children, but wasn't entirely certain how much she could be trusted. I didn't want to kick her out, I wanted to forgive, but her last response was troubling. She seemed sorry only that I had discovered her affair, which suggested she might have continued it otherwise. I waited for about an hour and then used a phone tracking app to check Helen's location. She was at our oldest daughter's house, so I informed the private investigator. He had a team of discreet individuals at his disposal, allowing them to monitor Helen without drawing attention. I also called our family lawyer, Ted Brown, who agreed to visit after finishing work for the day. Ted and I often played golf together and shared a lot of gossip over a six-pack. I had a cold one ready for him when he arrived. I explained that I needed advice and recounted the entire story. Ted promptly pointed out several potential crimes. Firstly, Helen's boss, David, had used coercion and blackmail to extort Zex from her in exchange for a promotion. He believed that a company as large as hers would likely have a robust code of conduct for employees and might include a morality clause within it. Lastly, he noted that Helen was a victim of harassment. Furthermore, having stated all of that, lacking concrete evidence, it boiled down to Helen's word against Jenkins, so I found myself right back where I started. I asked Ted for a few days to work on this, and I promised to get back to him. Ted emphasized the importance of obtaining proof to solidify our case, but he also stressed the need to follow proper procedures. He inquired about the possibility of divorcing Helen. My response was that today wasn't the day, maybe tomorrow, but not today. After a day filled with turmoil and unanswered questions regarding Helen's fidelity, I found myself unable to find rest. My mind was plagued by doubts about her honesty concerning the affair she had. Despite my attempts to sleep, the weight of the situation kept me awake, pondering over what steps to take next regarding our relationship. The decision about how to proceed seemed to rest entirely on Helen's shoulders, yet I couldn't escape a nagging suspicion that she might not have been entirely forthright about the extent of her infidelity. The complexity of the situation deepened the following morning when I received an early call from our daughter, who was evidently distressed about her mother's condition. She informed me that Helen had been inconsolable the previous night, a clear indication of her emotional turmoil. Despite my explicit instruction to Helen not to go to work, she had hinted at doing so to our daughter, only to later decide against it, opting to stay at a friend's place instead. Compelled by a sense of urgency to address the matter, I reached out to Helen, seeking to understand her current state of mind and her plans. Helen revealed her struggles and indecision, mentioning her departure from our friend Karen's place without a clear destination in mind. Sensing an opportunity for reconciliation or perhaps closure, I extended an invitation for her to return home, which she accepted. However, the potential for her to re-engage with her affair prompted me to contact a private investigator for an update on her activities. The investigator confirmed that Helen had initially appeared to be heading towards David Jenkins' apartment, only to change course. This information added another layer of complexity to the situation, as I awaited a comprehensive report that would hopefully separate fact from fiction. Upon Helen's return home, we engaged in a candid discussion about the preceding events and her feelings. She expressed deep remorse for her actions and the deceit that accompanied her affair, seeking forgiveness and emphasizing her desire for us to move past this episode. Helen attempted to assure me of her commitment to our marriage by explaining her intention to confront David for closure, denying any further inappropriate contact with him. Despite the reassurances, I found myself wrestling with insecurity and jealousy, emotions that were foreign to me before this ordeal. Helen's attempt to physically comfort me served as a temporary balm, yet the conversation left unresolved questions about trust and the future of our relationship. We sought refuge in each other's presence, retreating to bed in an attempt to escape the exhaustion and emotional strain that had enveloped us both. Amidst the ongoing turmoil regarding Helen's affair and its aftermath, I found myself grappling with uncertainty about how to proceed. One evening, while we were ostensibly engaged in the passive activity of watching television, I seized a moment of quiet to broach a subject that had been weighing heavily on my mind. I revealed to Helen my intentions to take legal action against her company and David Jenkins, expecting her to share my resolve or at least understand my perspective. To my surprise, Helen's reaction was not one of support, but rather of apprehension. She expressed a desire for the whole ordeal to be resolved quietly, without further harm to her company or anyone involved. Her stance puzzled me, especially since she had previously indicated a willingness to leave her job and asserted that her relationship with Jenkins had ended. Her defensive reaction raised doubts in my mind about her feelings towards Jenkins, wondering if perhaps she harbored deeper emotions for him than she had let on. In an attempt to clarify the gravity of Jenkins's actions and the pattern of his behavior, I presented Helen with evidence I had received from a private investigator. The documents highlighted Jenkins's dubious past, including a forced departure from a previous job in Atlanta due to allegations of harassment and historical accusations of rape during his college years. These revelations were intended to underscore the seriousness of Jenkins's character and actions, challenging Helen's seemingly protective stance towards him. Helen's response to this confrontation was swift and charged with emotion. She abruptly ended our conversation, indicating that I should proceed as I saw fit with the legal actions, and then isolated herself in the guest bedroom. Her reaction left me in a state of introspection, pondering the complexities of her feelings and the potential implications for our relationship. The night concluded with an unsettling silence, as Helen's defensive attitude towards Jenkins hinted at unresolved sentiments that complicated the already strained dynamics of our reconciliation. Another night of restless sleep followed, as it seemed that every time we inched closer to honesty and potential reconciliation, Helen introduced new obstacles. The next morning, I found myself once again in the kitchen as she entered. "Good morning. Would you like some breakfast?" "No thanks, I'm going out for a couple of hours. I'll be back before noon." She left without a kiss or an expression of love. I was certain she had been in contact with Jenkins, likely exchanging text messages all night. I felt us drifting further apart, and deep down, I had a growing belief that reconciliation was unlikely. Helen was gone for 2 hours, and before her return, the PI contacted me. Ed, she met Jenkins at Starbucks on 3rd Street. They had coffee and talked for over an hour before parting ways. She kissed him goodbye. That was all the information I needed to make my decision. When Helen returned around noon, she found me in the kitchen and poured herself a cup of coffee. "Helen, didn't you have enough coffee at Starbucks? Did you have me followed?" "No, one of my customers works there and saw you with Jenkins. Apparently you were quite cozy with him." "Yes, I met him, and as I told you yesterday, I was trying to get closure." "So is giving a guy a kiss part of getting closure?" "Helen, pack your bags and leave because I'm tired of your lies and deceit. Go to Jenkins for all I care because we are finished. I know you're still finding ways to see him and continue your affair. How do you tell your wife of so many years that your marriage has become a sham and is now over? How do you give up on so many years of love and companionship?" I stayed in the kitchen while she packed and left the house. Later I received a call from the PI, confirming that Helen was at her lover's apartment. I thanked him for the information and told him I no longer required his services. The following day was hectic. I contacted my lawyer and explained that I wanted to serve Helen with divorce papers as soon as possible, preferably at her lover's apartment. I divided all our bank accounts and canceled our joint credit cards, removing her name from anything we held jointly. The only thing I didn't cancel was her cell phone. I wanted to keep her on my account for a while. In the afternoon, after much contemplation, I called my lawyer friend Ted and instructed him to file lawsuits against both the pharmaceutical company and David Jenkins. My hope was to sue them simultaneously. The company for allowing its management to coerce a subordinate employee into an intimate situation through blackmail, resulting in a broken marriage. Jenkins was sued for extortion of a subordinate employee and harassment. I wanted him to be held accountable for ruining my marriage, even though Helen shared responsibility. I understood that the case might be weak without solid evidence, but it would draw unwanted attention to him and the company he represented. Ted had already prepared most of the necessary paperwork for these lawsuits. Before initiating legal action against Jenkins or the pharmaceutical company, it was necessary to file an administrative charge with the Federal Equal Opportunity Commission (FEC). This was a standard procedure and the initial step in addressing any harassment case. Helen called the same day Jenkins was served, and her tone was immediately hostile. "Ed, why have you done this? David could lose his job and any chance of promotion will be ruined. Helen, why do you care about his fate? You assured me you had closure with him. By the way, where are you staying? Karen mentioned you weren't with her. Have you moved in with Jenkins? I have no qualms about damaging his career, just as he has ruined our marriage. Is your friend male or female? Your behavior is so unlike you. I've never had my marriage wrecked before, and I believe you played a significant role in it." With that, I ended the call. The following day, an off-duty sheriff's deputy located Helen at Jenkins' apartment and served her with the divorce papers. That evening, she called again, this time in tears. "Ed, how could you serve me like that? I thought our marriage meant more to you, and I hoped we could salvage it. We had a wonderful marriage until that man seduced you. I felt like I mattered very little to you in recent months. I sensed something was amiss when you dyed your hair, but I trusted you completely and never investigated further. Let's see how long Jenkins keeps you around. And yes, I know you've moved in with him. Have you forgotten he's 15 years younger than you? You're just his current fling, and when he grows tired of you, he'll likely cast you aside. I'm dividing everything equally, including our children's debts. I checked our outstanding balance today, and it's just under $400,000. That means we each have nearly a $200,000 loan to repay. I don't know how you'll support your lover when he loses his job and still pay off the loan, but that's your problem. You need to get yourself a lawyer, and I caution you that if you contest a divorce, I will become ruthless. I possess videos that I will share with everyone we know. In truth, I had no such videos. But she was unaware of that fact. The following day, I formally resigned from my job in the insurance business. I didn't want to have a job or income while the divorce proceedings were ongoing. The insurance business was a family-owned venture, so I could potentially return in the future. Due to my recent illness, I had worked very little in the past year, and my doctor recommended I take it easy for the next 6 months. Helen's actions left me utterly bewildered. Helen seemed torn between her desire to preserve our marriage and her inclination to maintain her relationship with her paramour. Ted gave me a call to inform me that the pharmaceutical company had responded to our lawsuit. They were taken aback by the legal action and had suspended Jenkins pending an internal inquiry. Ted had inquired about the number of harassment cases required for Jenkins to be terminated. Surprisingly, the Dallas office was unaware of the issues that led to Jenkins leaving the Atlanta office. Our lawsuit had definitely captured their attention, and they expressed their willingness to settle out of court. I asked Ted if we could postpone settling until after the divorce, since I had no intention of sharing anything with Helen. Helen attempted to call me, but I declined her calls, a move that must have infuriated her as she made multiple attempts throughout the day. It seemed that she was starting to feel the consequences of her actions and things were only going to get tougher. Helen came to the house the following day, saying, "Ed, I need to talk to you, and you haven't been answering my calls." "No, I didn't answer because I have nothing to say to you. You've already chosen the bed you want to lie in, and it's not mine. Please don't be like this." "Helen, I believe I've made myself abundantly clear, and to be honest, I'm tired of repeating myself. I won't stand to be made a fool of. You cheated, not just once, and not just for a weekend, but for several months. Then you attempted to deceive your way out of it. You've hurt me in ways I can't even put into words, and considering my health, this is not the right time in my life to deal with all of this. Somewhere along the way, you forgot about the in-sickness and in-health part of our wedding vows. Now you are no longer a part of my life. You've lied to me since Christmas and carried on a hidden affair with your boss. I'm sure your company will soon terminate him, and most likely you as well. You've ruined my life, so I will do everything within my power to ruin yours and Jenkins's as well. David was terminated this morning, and I am on administrative leave. He has no savings and is very distraught. Well, that brightens my day. I suppose both of you will soon be kicked out of his fancy apartment. Just remember you have a $200,000 debt to pay in addition to your car loan and insurance. By the way, you're over 10 days late with your car insurance premium, and under the policy terms it will be canceled today. You'd better find yourself a new insurance broker. You've always taken care of all that, so why are you stopping my policy? You really don't get it, do you? There is no us, and there is no me in your life anymore. I will no longer act in your best interests. You have a new man in your life to do that, but I guess he's only capable of being a good lover. Your actions have brought all of this upon yourself, so if you want to blame someone, blame yourself. Now, unless there's something specific you'd like to discuss, you need to leave." I was reluctant to move, but the necessity of dividing our assets forced my hand. I couldn't afford to buy out Helen's share of the house, so I listed it for sale, and it quickly found a buyer. Since there were no outstanding debts on the house, the proceeds from the sale would significantly contribute to clearing my share of the debt. I discovered an apartment near the hospital that fit within my budget. Fortunately, my hospital was one of the top heart hospitals in the southern region, and it was now just a few blocks away. I packed up all the belongings I wanted from our former home without consulting Helen, as she was the one responsible for everything that had transpired. Once my relocation was complete, I informed Helen that she had a limited time to retrieve her belongings from the house, or I would donate everything to Goodwill. I made it clear that I had already vacated the house, which now had a new owner, and she had just 2 weeks to collect what she wanted to keep. Helen called me again, shouting into the phone, accusing me of taking all the valuable items from the house and removing things she wanted. I responded that I had been generous, given that when she moved out of the house and into her lover's arms, she forfeited her right to anything acquired during our marriage. Weeks passed with no further communication. The sale of the house was completed, and we divided the proceeds. I used my share to pay off my portion of the debt. Being debt-free gave me a sense of relief, as I despised owing money to anyone. Then Ted, my lawyer, informed me that Helen was contesting the divorce terms related to the distribution of our assets. We had initially divided everything equally, and I had nothing to hide, so I wondered what was at issue. The judge presiding over the case, an elderly gentleman with years of experience in divorce proceedings, inquired about the nature of the dispute since the assets had already been divided. Suddenly, it became evident that Helen sought a 50% stake in the insurance business. My lawyer and I conferred briefly and then addressed the judge, stating, "Your Honor, my client does not own the insurance business, it belongs to his father. Due to severe health issues, my client has had to resign, and he is no longer associated with the company." Helen's lawyer requested proof, prompting my father in his 80s to stand and ask for permission to speak, which the judge granted. He affirmed, "I am Ed's father, and what his lawyer stated is accurate. I still own the insurance business, and it will remain under my name until my passing, after which it will be passed down to my son." I glanced at Helen, and if expressions could narrate tales, hers would convey shame. She whispered something to her lawyer, who then stood and declared that there would be no further contestation of the divorce. The judge subsequently finalized the divorce. I was now a free man, but it saddened me deeply because Helen and I had once shared a wonderful marriage. That was before that despicable Jenkins entered the picture. He was undoubtedly a homewrecker. My son accompanied me to the proceedings and requested that I wait as he needed to use the restroom. Helen approached me, a move that I'm sure required some courage. "Ed, I'm sorry that our marriage has come to this, and I apologize for lying to you and for being unfaithful. Everything you predicted has sadly come true. David left me for a younger woman. His life was in ruins after losing his job, and he squandered a significant portion of the house proceeds. Now I'm drowning in debt with a poorly paying job. I hope this brings you satisfaction." "Well, you brought all of this upon yourself. My actions were merely reactions to yours. I hope you can understand that. Can we still be friends?" The pharmaceutical company eventually settled out of court. I was $500,000 richer. Perhaps I could have held out for more, but at that point, I simply wanted to put everything behind me. It wasn't about the money, it was about seeking justice. Helen struggled to find a job that paid as well as her previous one and remained in debt. Life presented one challenge after another for her. My children stayed in touch and offered assistance in various ways, but even they found it difficult to forgive her. According to them, she rarely dated and appeared older than her age. I felt sympathy for her, but she had made her own choices, and now she had to face the consequences. Jenkins experienced a difficult life as his past continued to haunt him whenever he applied for a job. He had no money to his name and declared bankruptcy to avoid a contentious legal battle with me. His car was repossessed, and he ended up working at Lowe's and residing in a modest apartment. The lavish lifestyle he once enjoyed was a thing of the past. As for me, I spent an additional 4 months completing my rehabilitation before returning to the insurance business on a part-time basis, eventually transitioning to full-time. To reduce the tax burden, my father initiated the process of transferring 10% of the ownership to me each year. I occasionally dated, but I hadn't met the right woman yet. For some reason, I compared every woman I met to the old Helen. I encountered her at one of my children's homes during Christmas, and she appeared far from her best.